We are back here again with the second to last team here, coming in at 7th, the Virginia Vipers. And wow, Virginia, kind of a rough season for them. They forfeited 6 games, 4 being to Tennessee for not showing up to their scheduled game, and 2 being to the Jammers for a little bit of an altercation that went down and meant that the last couple games couldn't have been played. So they end the season 7-9. Could have easily seen them doing better based on the talent they had in the roster, but what happened, and it's in the past. Virginia will have new management moving forward, so unfortunately for some of these people on the team, it'll be the last time we're seeing them on a BFL field. I will still do a quick recap of their team, although we will never see them again, so I'm not going to go too in-depth here. I gave them a team comparison of the Washington Commanders because of the ownership change and all that. There was a big mess with the Commanders, if you're not familiar with that. MVP and Defensive Player of the Year had to be Day Hayes, pretty much solely off that Week 1 performance where he had 4 interceptions and 2 pick sixes. He was definitely up there on the team in tackles as well, although they did cycle through a lot of different players on defense. I went with 75 coaching just because of the whole ownership situation. No one was really in charge. No one was really held accountable for their actions. Anyway, the defense was definitely pretty strong, definitely the strong suit of this team. So I gave them an 86. They stopped some of the better teams on offense in the league. They definitely showed out in Week 1 defensively, so I gave them an 86. The offense was pretty rough. They struggled to get into the end zone. They would use their QB run to move the ball about 15 yards and then maybe complete a pass to move up close to the end zone, but they really struggled to punch it in. So I went with the 78. A little bit higher than the Blue Crabs offense, obviously, which I think is definitely deserving. I went with an 80 overall, just pretty neutral, pretty average. We didn't get to see a lot of play out of them because of what happened with missing those 6 games, which is almost half the season. On their offense, I went with C pluses across the board just because they kind of lacked a quarterback. Their run game was overall kind of weak. Their pass game was weak. They didn't have a lot of size, which is why I went with a C+ for their tight ends. Overall, I think just a pretty below average offense. And then I went with B+ at corner because they definitely have some good pieces at corner, which I will go over later in this video. B- at safety just because of what they lack stopping the run versus the overall man coverage of this team. So let's move on here. One of the few bright spots for Virginia this season was Day Hayes. He played very well. On offense, I went with a Michael Pittman player comparison because, he's a big body receiver. He's not really going to beat you with his speed, but he has really good hands and overall is a pretty good route runner. So I went with Michael Pittman, which I think is a pretty good comparison. Defense, I went with Trayvon Diggs because his coverage is not the tightest, but he can make a play on the ball. So tackling, he was pretty good. I went with an 87. He definitely missed some tackles. Block shedding 87. He's just, like I said, a big corner. Pretty strong. Pass coverage, I went with an 87. Could have been higher, could have been lower. We did see him blow coverage at times, but at other times he was locked down, so it's kind of hard to put a number on it. I went kind of middle of the pack, definitely slightly above league average, and I gave him an 87 overall on defense. Next is John Hagan, who is listed as quarterback. Definitely could have given him a running back rating, but I elected to go with quarterback. I gave him Malik Willis as a player comparison, which I felt was another really good comp. He was really good in the run game, really fast. Was pretty much the only reason they even moved the ball sometimes. And he has a fairly strong arm, which I went with 83. The accuracy is just generally pretty bad. I feel like most of the times he stepped in at quarterback, it was just to run the ball, and if he saw someone open, he would think about throwing it. I went with a 78 overall, just right around average, maybe slightly below. Quarterback ratings are a little bit differently made just because there's not really that many quarterbacks in the league. Went with 88 speed as well. He's pretty fast, but That's pretty much all that can be said about him on defense. He was definitely a pretty sound tackler, but missed at times. It's just also hard with these Virginia players because of the small sample size. I went with an 80 overall on defense. Another bright spot for this Virginia team, he did not play very much on offense, or defense, really, for that matter. Just all these players, same story, pretty small sample size, but I do think that they could definitely be higher if they had played more. He had 3 interceptions on defense, which that's up there with the league leaders. I believe it's second or third. Just definitely played pretty good on defense. I feel like I could have gone pass coverage higher, but didn't really see much out of him, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. Overall, didn't play offense very much, but he was more of a deep threat, and he does have some pretty good speed. Next up, we have Ryan Kick. Some could say that he was the brightest spot of the season for Virginia. Definitely up for debate, but some people may not know this. After what transpired in that Jacksonville series, the big altercation, if you don't know, I'm not going to talk about it any further. There's just some events that made it so we could not continue play. Virginia ended up forfeiting those last 2 games. There was a big debate on if they should even stay in the league. Ryan Kick stepped up for Virginia, promised to keep the boys in check, which he did till the end of the season. Big shout out to him for that. He saved me from having to find a replacement team. I gave him a tight end comparison on offense just because when he was out there, he was asked to be out there more of as a blocker. Tyler Higbee, one of the best blocking tight ends in the NFL, gave him that as a comparison. The 97 strength really stands out because I'm pretty sure he's literally a bodybuilder. Anyway, I gave him safety on defense just because of that versatility. He would rush the passer sometimes when asked to do so, and he played some pretty solid coverage from time to time. So I gave him Jabril Peppers, more of a run-stopping safety. Next up, we have Nate Waters. I believe only played 1 series for them against Scranton in Week 4. Had one of the more funny and lighthearted moments of Virginia's season. He was vaping out there on the field. Definitely gave a lighthearted aspect to the Virginia team at the end there, which was really nice to see. Had a really strong arm and was decent on the run, but the accuracy wasn't really there. So I gave him a Baker Mayfield comparison, just because of, he's a funny guy and decent scrambling, but a really strong arm and the accuracy's not really there. I feel like it lines up. Went with Cam Sutton on defense. Not the most athletic corner, but definitely played some decent coverage when asked to, and pretty solid all around out there. Next up, we have Josh Hoyt. Honestly, only reason I even remember this dude is because of the fact that he caught the first touchdown of the season. So I don't remember him being super good at receiver other than the fact that he was one of the only people out there consistently catching the ball. If you remember the first series of the season, it was just like an incomplete pass fest, like nonstop incompletions. Definitely took the longest of any series to wrap up. Anyway, just catching stood out to me on offense, which is why I gave him that Jacoby Myers comparison. Pretty sure-handed receiver. On defense, I went with Bryce Hall just because he's pretty solid in coverage, but the athleticism kind of lacks. Kind of fits well with Bryce Hall. Next up here, we have Jacob Sansone. I don't know how you pronounce it, to be honest with you. Hopefully one of those is correct. Kind of same story. Athleticism isn't really up there, but decent coverage on defense, good catching on offense. So I went with Michael Gallup and Nate Hobbs as his player comps, just because they're kind of the same as Josh Hoyt's player comparisons. Kind of similar players, honestly, but didn't really see a lot out of either of them, so I just went with pretty conservative ratings and player comparisons. And finally, who else could I possibly wrap up with other than Nick Grasso? Johnny Manziel player comp. Definitely a little generous, I think. Maybe an NFL Johnny Manziel. Definitely could throw, God, I can't remember his name. Jamarcus Russell, quarterback for the Raiders. Yeah, I think that could also be a fitting comp. Anyway, just scrambling was pretty good. Definitely was only at quarterback to kind of take advantage of the fact that it's easier to get rushing yards at the QB position. Definitely struggled when asked to throw the ball downfield. But, yeah, overall, I think Johnny Manziel is a pretty fair comp, and I think a 79 overall is pretty fair. Anyway, that is it for the Virginia Vipers. Honestly, a little sad to see them go just because some of the players on the team were pretty committed and I actually enjoyed seeing them out there, but just kind of got ruined by some of the others that were included in the team. Pretty unfortunate scenario, to be honest. Anyway, we will be announcing eventually who is replacing them. We have the team all set and ready to go, just a matter of when I'm ready to put it out there. And goodbye to the Virginia Vipers. We'll see what they have with this new team coming in next season.